Hi, I wanted to do a video about Quetiapine because I was on it. I was on 400 milligrams of it and I tapered off it. After a really bad benzodiazepine withdrawal, I was in a very harmed place in terms of medication harm to the nervous system, harm to the brain, and it was severe. Not only because of the benzo withdrawal given by a doctor who should never have given it to me for that long, and then not tapered me off it, obviously just told me to stop taking it, and that caused this awful state of withdrawal, brain injury, nervous system injury. I was given quetiapine amongst loads of other medications, but I ended up on quetiapine in the end, 400 milligrams. And what I find interesting about quetiapine is it's given a lot to people for sleep problems, even though it is actually an antipsychotic and it is for that. It comes with so many side effects, and I saw a lot of people being put on these drugs and really not happy with the side effects and wanting to come off. People suffering with psychosis and just thinking, a lot of people would end up coming off the medication because of the awfulness of it. So anyway, I want to talk about how I tapered off it. And I noticed at the higher region that I could go down in bigger chunks. So I went down in 50 milligram chunks until I got to 150, where the psychiatrist I was working with at the time, still a psychiatrist, still did not believe in medication harm. Really, he didn't. And none of them do. And he said, just go down another 50 from 150 to 100. This really rocked the boat for me because I'd come from that very harmed place from the benzo withdrawal, hadn't been sleeping. My body was, in a real, not in a healthy way, nervous system warped to death. So that really rocked the boat for me. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going back into withdrawal. I'm going back into the whole thing again, akathisia, just torment. And I had to wait kind of 2 or 3 months after that cut. I even reinstated a little bit to 12.5. So I ended up on 112.5 because it was that bad. I was like, oh my God, I need to somehow soften the blow of this. Felt like I was having strokes. It was awful. But I got through it and I was on 112.5. The psychiatrist at the time was like, why, you can't take 12.5. You can't cut an extended release pill. And my thing is once you're harmed, changing brand, changing into liquid, or changing to instant can be extremely big change and can actually completely destabilize a person. We're all different, but I knew within my intuition, my instincts, that this was not a good idea for me to change brand, to change this quetiapine at all, because it was such a heavy drug, and it really affected me on many receptors in the brain. So yeah, I wanted to make as minimal changes as possible. So I was on an extended release pill. And so when I got down to 112.5, I had to cut a 50 milligram pill. I had 50 milligrams. They didn't do 20 milligram pills of this particular brand. It just went down to 50. And so I cut that 50 milligram pill to make the 12.5, and nothing awful happened to me. All that happens when you cut a pill is it turns into instant. And I think the dangerous element that psychiatrists like to talk about, don't cut an extended release pill. If you've got a 200 milligram pill or 100 milligram pill and you cut that and then you just take it, you're getting 100 milligrams or 200 milligrams all in one go. Whereas if you cut a 50 milligram pill, that's a way less, number one, way less going into your system, but you can also space out the doses. So you've got those little bits of the pill and you space the doses out. So your body gets used to getting all of that in, well, it's not all in one go then, because as soon as you cut the pill, obviously it becomes instant, doesn't it? Whereas when it's got the coating, that's what has the extended release pill. It goes into the stomach, ugh. And then it slowly releases through the day. Whereas you cut it, it's going to go into the system. And this is, you know, for me, very creative, very visual person. Anyway, so I luckily was talking to this guy called Hans, who has been my savior in this. He's just got great intuition. He's been tapering for years. He's been trying to get off 2 antidepressants. He's got a lot of knowledge and really knowing about the whole thing. And he said to me, "You're going to be fine, Emma. Cut the extended release pill." He's on Wellbutrin, can't pronounce that very well, an antidepressant. He's got an extended release version. He can't change to another version. He has to stay on this brand, similar to me. So he cuts his pill, he divides it up throughout the day, and it makes it extended release. Nothing awful has happened to him. The psychiatrist told me that I'd get a rash, that some awful shit would happen to me, but it never did. So it was a scary moment for me when I got to 100 milligrams of quetiapine, because it meant that I really had to cut a 50 milligram pill and start doing this gradual, and I would take it at night, my whole dose at night. So what I did is I started taking my dose at about 9:30, took a little bit, took another little bit throughout the evening, and it made it extended release. I did feel a few things like, oh, you know, when you feel like you're falling in your sleep, or a few jolts and things like that. But after about 5 days, it just completely smoothed out. And I see a lot of people on surviving antidepressants, and I don't know whether my video will get out there, because I know there's a lot of people who are on quetiapine and really struggling to taper it. And a lot of the brands, especially the extended release, they don't go any lower than 50. 50 is your lowest dose. You cannot stop the medication at 50 milligrams. It's so connected to your sleep. So a lot of people find they come off it and then they complete insomnia, you know, for months, even over a year of insomnia. Whereas I dry cut that extended release pill with scales. I worked out all the percentages. I worked it all out. And I went down to 0.01, which is a speck. But you know, when I got to 0.08, I was still having symptoms, still. And from 100 to 0, it was definitely a slower process. So I did 10% cuts. I'd see how that would feel. I find with antipsychotics, there's a 2-week kind of half-life, or whatever you want to call it. So let's say you do your cut, 2 weeks later, you'll feel the cut. Something about how it comes through the body. I had it with risperidone as well. So I think it's a very antipsychotic trait. Sometimes people have it with Valium, 10 days to 2 weeks out. So I'd always wait until that 2-week mark, and I'd be like, then I would know how my body had reacted to the taper. Before, as I said, before the 100 milligram mark, I managed to go down by 50s, but the 150 to 100 was really like, whoa, you know? So I knew that I needed to do the 10%, the sensible, what we find on the forums, the sensible way in order to actually get off this drug safely and to be able to function. I mean, it's so terrifying, and people will relate. When you are going through those symptoms and you feel literally like you're dying, it's very, very scary place to be. So I did 10% cuts. I could see how I was doing. I might go up to 15%, 16%, 17%. I would always gauge it as to how I was reacting. Okay, I didn't get very many symptoms that cut. I think I could cut a little bit more. But when I got down to the little bits, that's when you need to be careful, because the percentages get larger. The less drug you have, the bigger the percentage is going to be when you take out. Like if you've got 3 specks left, you're taking a third away. So just to be mindful of that. However, it's difficult to say to anyone, this is what you do, because it should be a body-led taper. So only you and your body are going to be able to tell you how fast you can go. You know, people would say to me, how long is the taper going to take? I have no idea. I could not have told you or guessed how long that taper was going to take, because each moment was different. When I got to, like I say, 0.08, I started having some more symptoms. So then I paused. So that's what I would do. I made a sensible cut, nothing too big at all, especially after the giant 150 to 100 leap. That really showed me that was not okay. And you've got to really listen to that. And there is just no such thing as too slow, and there is such a thing as too fast. Because if you go too fast, you come off the pill, and you could actually really have a backlash of symptoms and be suffering for months on end afterwards. And so I really have the belief of going slow, but not too, like, this is the frustrating thing, because I found that I felt better the more time went on. So it depends, because if you are suffering really badly, each cut you make, then that's a hard journey. But again, what decision do we have? We have to just keep going slow, waiting for that wave to pass, and cut again. I would always wait for all the symptoms I was experiencing to go before I cut again. I didn't want to create this like roll. However, I know that some of us are in a situation where, you know, it's pretty bad, the symptoms. However, if you're on a drug that doesn't involve a tolerance aspect to it, I always say holding is a huge thing, because when I tapered from 150 milligrams to 100, and it literally rocked my boat and it terrified me, I held. Now, from 400 milligrams to 100, it probably took me, I'd say, about 8 months. And that last bit was way too fast. And I had about 3 months where I had to really recover from that cut. And I was so terrified to move the Quetiapine that I actually held at 100 milligrams. And I decided to carry on with my hyperbolic water taper of the benzo, because that was so gradual. That was taking tiny little specks out. And I thought, okay, after my 3-month pause of the shuddering effects of that last Quetiapine taper, I started the benzo. And I basically did that for about 8 to 10 months. So I held the Quetiapine at 100 milligrams for about 10 months. So when I came back to the Quetiapine, it was much easier to taper. I was really struggling to even move it 5%, 2% since I dropped from 150 to 100. I did try, but it was a lot. And I think I could feel it because I had that little 12.5 that I added on. So I was at 112.5, and I took that off just to gauge where I was at. And that was really challenging. So I thought, right, I've reached a real moment here on this drug, and I need to pause. And I held for 10 months, and that hold was transformative. And I don't know whether, because I was tapering off the benzos, so my brain is also healing, and it's been less of all the drugs are coming out. So anyway, I held the benzo at 0.125, very little, but there's no such thing as a little dose, because that was the drug that caused the issue. And I then began the Quetiapine taper at 100 milligrams, and I decided to hold the benzo just in case that might help me a little bit, because that was the initial problem drug. That was a decision that I made, and it was a very difficult decision to make, but I decided to do it that way. So yeah, from 100 to 0 of Quetiapine was a completely different story once I held and I let my body heal. I was sleeping. So again, sleep, obviously the Quetiapine was helping me sleep. I was on mirtazapine as well, also making me sleep. So there's a lot of healing going on in this time, and it definitely helped my taper, because before that, it was a good 8 months to a year of no sleep, severe benzo withdrawal, severe polydrugging, severe everything, akathisia, psychosis, all created by that benzo withdrawal, because it created chronic insomnia. I didn't sleep for all that time. It was horrendous, and I was pacing in a circle. So, amongst the other horrendous symptoms that you get, like feeling like the earth is crushing you and you're on fire, and nerve pains and I can't even explain. I'm inhumane. So I dry cut all the way down to 0.01 on a scale, and I got to the 0.08 mark, which I realized my scale could only go down to there. That was the last. Past that, it couldn't really tell. It couldn't, you know. So then I thought, okay, I can see this little 0.08 by eye of quetiapine. I am going to use my eye. So I would cut down to 0.06, 0.04, 0.02. So my eye would do this. So for example, 0.08, half of that little nugget is going to be 0.04. Half of that 0.04 is going to be 0.02. And half of that is going to be 0.01. So I would literally measure that out with my eye, you know. And as crazy as that may seem to doctors, that is what a lot of people have to do in order to get off this stuff. And I decided to go down, and my jumping dose was the last spec. I know that some people's jumping doses, they do it earlier, but I can safely vouch for this, that I did not experience anything when I jumped off. Anything. If anything, I had a bit of dark chocolate and I felt like, okay, no, that was too stimulating. My nervous system was definitely sensitive and I had to be careful about what I was consuming. I don't have caffeine. I don't have sugar. Okay, sometimes sugar is the hardest one, but I would not at that period of my life be eating a big chocolate cake. You know, it's like, you just got to be careful, and no alcohol. And just no supplements, no additional things. So that entire taper, I did clean eating. I did do keto for a very long time, which I've now actually returned to. I do believe this helps brain health and inflammation. I really do. And I was a veggie before. I was vegan for a bit because I don't agree with the mass murder of animals and the over farming and just the over everything of it. And I don't feel like we need to kill all these animals. You know, it's just, anyway, we wouldn't normally have, you know, this amount of meat. And I think it's really America that it's just quite over, you know, and everyone is just out here. But unfortunately, I do think that there are some things that can be healed by a keto high protein diet. Doesn't mean you have to be mass killing loads of animals. I mean, one human. Anyway, that's a bit of a paradox, or it's a tricky one for me, but it has helped. And I do plan to continue with the keto until I'm off the mirtazapine, which is my next medication. But I just wanted to explain my quetiapine journey. Any questions, please do contact. I did cut an extended release pill all the way down. I'm off it. I've been off it for over 6 months now, and I'm okay. I'm okay. And yeah,